And tonight, I want to thank again our program sponsors, AARP Sheridan, who is represented here tonight by Clarence and quite a few, Clarence Montano, and quite a few of our respite caregivers are also volunteers with the local AARP Action Committee. Our other sponsors are John Oman with State Farm Insurance, and he has some information down here. And there's an article in there about how to get paid as a caregiver, so you might want to have a look at that. Bigelow Grant Writing, which is my business. Mary Kay and Kim Love, and also Advanced Therapy. And Jenny Rieger with Advanced Therapy is going to be one of our speakers at a later program about PT and OT, physical therapy and occupational therapy. If you haven't picked up a book bag yet, please pick one up. We have some information in that. And you'll also be able to put things for the following weeks in your bag and keep them together. And if you haven't entered for the door prize yet, please go down and see Teresa. You need me to turn the volume up. I will do that. Okay, go down and see Teresa and get signed up. Is that better, Claire? And you, at the end, at the 12th night, we will draw. So every time you come, you get to enter. So it's not a one-time thing. It's a way that we're keeping track of how many people are here every night, because we want to be able to report on that. But it's also a way that you can have more and more chances to win the AARP swag bag and also a $200 Visa card. Okay, I think I'm all the way down to introducing the presenter, which is me. So I'm a one-person show tonight, but it's not usually that way. So by way of introduction, I have been or am a daughter, a sister, a wife, now widow, mom, mother-in-law, stepmom, stepmother-in-law, grandmother, great-grandmother, aunt, neighbor, semi-retired, independent grant writer, gardener, bike rider, reader, piano student. I couldn't say pianist, not quite. Piano student, hiker, skier. Those are my relationships, my roles, and my interests. But tonight, I am speaking to you as a former caregiver. The most precious role and relationship I have had in my life. So tonight I'm going to, before we launch into the presentation, I want to use a prayer from this book. It's The Caregiver's Companion. And this is a prayer from caregivers. Lord Jesus, I come to you with my hands wide open, lifted to you. I want only what's best for me. And so, Lord, I hold out my hands to you. Lead me, Lord, as I continue my caregiving journey. Sometimes I fail to see my own value, my own worth. So I ask you, Jesus, to hold me as the precious, beloved child you created me to be. I am wonderfully and fearfully made by you. You know me completely. You know what I can and cannot do. Help me see my limits, where boundaries need to be set, or what is to be surrendered or relinquished. You know what is best. I put my hand in yours, Lord, to lead me over this mountain. I place myself, my hopes, my dreams into your arms, for I know that all good blessings come from you. Amen. So I didn't want to ramble, so I've actually written out my comments tonight. And our topic tonight is gathering loved ones' information. Whether you become a caregiver slowly or over time, suddenly due to a health crisis, having the right information will help you be a better caregiver and lessen the stress of not knowing what you need to know. And I think you've probably all been in that situation saying, I should have known that, but I don't know that. I don't have that information. Each of our workshops are led by a subject matter expert. And so I stand before you as a subject matter expert only in that I have been a caregiver. And I have done some things right, and I've not done some things that I wish I had done, or in hindsight, I'm thinking, oh, I should have done that differently. And so I have been a caregiver for both my mother and then my husband. And my mom taught me how to do a lot of things. She also taught me how to be a caregiver. And she was very forgiving as I struggled in how to understand how to do some things. And she was just very forgiving and taught me a lot in that. But I'm now also preparing my children to be able to care for me. Because knowing the experience that I had caring for my mom and for my husband, I realized that there's the next generation and who's going to care for me and how will they know, specifically to this topic, how will they know the information that they need to know in order to care for me well? So I wanted to refer to several of the handouts that you have. This is a handout from AARP, Prepared Care, and we gave these to, we had these in all the bags last year. Don't look in your bag, it's not there. It's listed there, but it's not there. And Clarence is going to order more. There's about 6 of them over on the table here. First 6 people, don't go now. We'll get one of these. But there's an article in here. There's a lot in here, but there's an article in here about starting the conversation. And one of the ways to start the conversation with your loved one is, I just read an article about gathering all your important papers. Sometime, can you show me where yours are and what you'd like us to do just in case? How do you start that conversation? If your loved one is, if you sense that they're getting to the point where maybe you're going to be caring for them, how do you have those conversations with them ahead of time? I had some of these conversations with my mom. She lived independently in Spearfish in a senior home. My husband and I moved back to Spearfish for a few years, then Gillette, and then here in Sheridan. Well, that distance kept getting further and further, and she refused to leave her apartment and move here. I tried to get her to do that, but she did agree that she would come here on her way to nursing care if she couldn't live alone. That was as far as I could get the agreement. So I said, okay, Mom, I will just come to your place more often. And for about a year, I went to her home once a month and spent the weekend, and I cleaned her apartment. I took her out for some social time. I checked the refrigerator, make sure she still had food in the refrigerator, did those things. Never once did I say, Mom, what insurance do you have? Mom, what medications are you on? Mom, where is the title to your van? I had plenty of opportunity, but I didn't ask any of those questions. I didn't want to cry, and she didn't want to be a burden to me. And that really kind of ruled that relationship. I knew quite a bit about her wishes, though, and I knew her well. So I knew she wanted to be buried at the Black Hills National Cemetery, where my dad is buried. And I wanted her marker to read his loving wife. I only learned that 2 weeks before she came to live with me 24/7, because I took her on an outing one of those weekends and we went to the cemetery. And as we were walking around the cemetery, her with her walker, so we didn't walk far, and she said, she looked at a marker, she says, my loving wife, that's what I want mine to say. It's like, well, I just found that out in time, because I wouldn't have known, and I was able, she was able to tell me, and I was able to honor those wishes. I also knew she didn't want to have our open heart surgery again. She'd had open heart surgery 27 years before she came to live with us, and the valve was to last an average of 10 years. It lasted 27 years, but she was having congestive heart failure, and she told me after she had that, when she thought she had 10 years, she didn't understand the whole thing of average. She thought at 10 years she was going to die, and when she passed that mark, she still didn't understand that, but she was glad she did, because she knew she was not going to have open heart surgery again. She was social and she was not a complainer. She didn't want to burden us by living with us, but she did agree that she would come on her way to nursing care. And I'd asked her under what circumstance she would leave her apartment. We at least got to that. And she told me about, she lived in that senior apartment, my dad for many years, and then her for 30 years. So she had seen a whole bunch of people come and go. My dad was 65 when they moved in. My mom was only 55. I think that was about the age. So she lived there. Maybe she was 60. She lived there over 35 years. You know, she was the youngest one, and then she was, you know, near the oldest one. And she had seen the pattern of people moving in, being very independent, and then their kids come and help them and move them into assisted living, and then they move into nursing care, and then they're gone. You know, and so she knew that pattern, and she anticipated that for herself. But she said, when I cannot drive, I won't live independently. And at one time I asked my older brother, I said, so have you actually ridden with mom? Yeah. I said, he said, no. I said, either have I. Do we think she can still drive? And so I suggested to my brother that maybe he should give her a driving test. And the next time I visited her on one of those weekends, she says, Tom thinks I need a driving test. I said, well, actually, it was my idea. She says, well, would you give it to me? Because he would make me too nervous. I said, okay, Mom, you know, I'll get in the car with you and let's drive around to the places in town that you normally go. And so she did that. And frankly, she was really very good at this. I felt very safe riding with her, unlike my dad, just before we told her that she needed to take his keys away. So she passed. But my mom, thankfully, was a minimalist before it was fashionable. So she wasn't sentimental about a lot of things. I didn't have to worry about what to do with her things. And she didn't have much in her 2-bedroom apartment. I had joked with her often as she quit using something, she wanted to get rid of it right away. She gave me her little loaf pans once. She says, I'm never going to make quick bread again, so you should take these. And then, you know, she just kept moving things out of her apartment. I said, you know, it's going to take me maybe a day to clean out your apartment. And that's exactly what it took, was a day for me to go back to Spearfish and clean out her apartment. And I knew her only source of income was Social Security. So she had a pretty simple life. She had 2 financial accounts, a checking account that my brother was co-owner on and a savings account that I was co-owner on. So we had, even without her participation, we actually had access to all of her financial assets. But I didn't know where in her apartment any of that stuff was. I knew she had a small life insurance policy. I didn't know where that was either. Didn't know her doctor's names or her prescriptions. But I didn't anticipate needing to have these conversations or locating this information while my mom was suffering from signs of dementia. She got a UTI and we didn't know that was the problem, but her neighbor called and said, your mom is really not well. You need to come and get her. And she had congestive heart failure. We thought that was the issue. She had edema. It took a nurse in the TCU here at the hospital to identify that the UTI was really what was causing the dementia. But we had to get through a lot of hospital visits and visit with the cardiologist and everything else while my mom really wasn't acting like my mom and didn't know why she was here with us. And I had to make some decisions, you know, during that time. But when after they had treated the UTI and she was more herself, I could have the conversation with her about how the cardiologist had said she was a candidate for having a new heart valve put in through the aorta, which is just, to me, it's a miracle that they can do that. But I asked my mom, so what do you think about that? She said, well, let's try that. Okay. So, you know, that started, she came to live with us in November. So that started lots of trips up and down to Billings to visit doctors. And many drives in snowstorms. It must have been a hard winter, or maybe I was just on the road a lot more than I usually am in the winter. My mom, you know, last week, Stella talked about giving your your loved one agency. My mom became a real difficult stick. You know, to get a blood draw or an IV set. And occasionally when the medical people were out of the room, I'd say, Mom, you know, we can just stop this. We can just go home and you can live out the rest of your life. And she'd say, no, let's just keep going. I'm okay. Okay. So I gave her that agency that she could stop. You know, I wasn't forcing her to have this surgery. But how did I gather the information I needed up to that point without her assistance, without her knowing why she came to be at our house? She said, I'm so sorry I came to visit you when I got sick. You know, she didn't remember how she had gotten here. So I went through her apartment and I found everything that was paper and put it in a box. I went through every drawer, every cupboard, she did not have a file system. She didn't have a file box, so she had, some things were in the China buffet, some things were in her purse, some things were in the closet, so I just had to go through and pull all the paperwork together. I put it in one box, I took it home, and I started going through the paperwork. My mom filed by month. No, so she had her check register, her check statement, her bank statement, and everything that month was in there with a rubber band around it. So I had to open up a lot of those in order to find what she actually had. My brother aided, and I went through her wallet, and that's actually and good advice in one of these. Go through her wallet. You'll find out what's in her wallet. She's probably got her Medicare card in there. She's got a driver's license. She's got, everything she's paying a membership on is in her wallet. So just going through her wallet. And my brother added me to her checking account, so I had access to her funds. I wasn't 65 yet. So I didn't have Medicare, but my husband had Medicare and a Medicare supplement, an AARP Medicare supplement. But my mom had a Medigap policy. I didn't have any idea what that meant. I kept asking, is this a supplement? What is this? I took it to the hospitals and the doctor, but I still didn't understand what it was. I didn't know if we were going to get bills. I didn't know what it was going to pay. So if any of you are in the dark about Medigap like I was, be sure and bring that up on the night that we have a panel here about Medicare and Medicaid, and ask what that Medigap thing is, because it's a different kind of Medicare coverage. And I was in the dark. I didn't have power of attorney for her financial, but I had access to her financials. But I wasn't a lot of fun. My mom went to adult daycare so she could have social time and fun, because when she was with me, I had to call people and talk to them and then say, yes, my mom is right here. And my mom would get on the phone and say, yes, my daughter will take care of all of that and hand it back to me so I can, get through all the process. So having that power of attorney ahead of time would have allowed me to email or fax that power of attorney to people and visit with them ahead of time. Because I really, it was tired with my mom. Mom, I'm going to call so-and-so and talk to him about this. Okay. Give her the phone, get it back. And I had to do it during hours of the day that she was at her best. So she would understand why we were talking to them. But then I overheard her tell someone that her daughter should have taken care of more of this earlier. She said, my daughter takes care of all of that. And I wish I had given it to her earlier. I really could have used the help. So don't be shy like I was about just asking, because she was glad to not deal with any of that ever again. I didn't have power of attorney for medical decisions either. My mom was here at the hospital and they were going to transfer her to Billings. And I knew the doctors here, I'm a member of the community, and I didn't have any problem really being part of my mom's medical care and helping make the decisions, but I didn't know what would happen when we got to Billings. So I asked the hospital if they would hold on to her for several hours while I called our local attorney and asked him to draft a power of attorney for medical decisions for my mom, to give me that power of attorney. And we got that written and explained to my mom, signed, notarized, and I went with that to Billings. So that when we checked her into the hospital in Billings, they had that information and they knew that I could make decisions on her behalf when she wasn't able to. I don't think that's the right timing. I think you should do that ahead of time. My mom, this is all about information. My mom, like many of your loved ones, may be the last of their generation. The youngest of a family that were all now deceased before her. For the last month of my mom's life, she'd gotten the heart valve replaced. She was doing well. And then on a visit to the ER because she was tired, she was diagnosed with cancer that had already metastasized. And she went downhill very quickly and died within that month. And so family came to visit often during that month, and she was on hospice. So she knew during her last month that was rich. We didn't know it would be that quickly. But during a visit from my siblings, just a week or so before my mom's death, I started writing her obituary. And she probably suspected what I was doing because she was pretty sharp. But I would emerge from my office and come out to the family group, and I would ask a question or two, and then I'd go back in my office and write the next part. And in doing that, my mom shared with us stories that we had never heard. And so it was really healthy for her. We weren't talking about the weather or something unimportant. We were talking about, decisions that she had made early in our life that really we benefited from, and we had never taken the time to ask her about those things, so it was really a very enjoyable thing. So if you think writing an obituary is a sad thing or gathering the information for it, it's not. It's about asking questions about someone's life. I didn't have that in my notes tonight, but when I did that, I thought, I don't know a lot about my husband's early life either. And so I took the time to ask him questions and handwrote his obituary at the same time. And when he passed away, we decided to have the funeral just 2 days later. And the funeral home said, well, I need the obituary by noon. I said, I got it. I'll go home and type it up. We'll be okay. And I was able to be accurate about those things because I'd taken the time ahead of time. And it was accurate because I'd asked him, and he was able to provide that input. And I think, Joanne, I'm going to share this. I think Joanne's husband actually took care of most of that and wrote it himself. So you can ask them that, but my mom or my husband didn't do that. So let's move forward. So here's my mom, crisis. My husband, we had some time to think about this. But I had an epiphany once. I ride bicycles, and I like riding on the shoulder of local highways. And that was some of my stress relief. So exercise helps your brain. But I realized in 2020 that John appeared more able to care for himself than he actually was. And none of our children live in this area. And I realized that if something happened to me by the proverbial bus or RV out on the shoulder of a highway, if the kids came home, took care of me, they might actually turn around and go home again and not realize that their dad couldn't actually take care of himself. And so I had that conversation with John about, if something happens to me, where do you want to be? Which of our kids do you want to live close to? Who do you want to live with? How would that work? And had that conversation with him, because I was his caregiver. And he wasn't able to live alone or take care of himself. And although he appeared to be able to for a long time, even after that. But we had that conversation not only between the two of us, but then we had the conversation with the chosen son, the one who he would go live near or with, and talk with him, talk with his wife. I then talked with my daughter, who was a co-executor of our estate. So everyone understood that this was the plan, that finances would all be funneled to his care there, so that I knew that if something happened to me, John was well cared for. And John knew what that plan was going to be. John's and my financial life is more complicated than my mom's was. And Damien, I'm going to use your name here tonight, because last year Damien cautioned us about the whole digital area and making sure that we're able to close accounts like social accounts, that we're able to access things that are password protected. Well, I don't know about you, but my phone has a password on it. My computer has a password on it. I have passwords for any number of other things. I have a Facebook account, etc. So over this last year, as we had talked about this topic last year, I've added my daughter-in-law to my Facebook account. So in my demise, she can close the account or do whatever she wants with it. She's, has that opportunity. I added my daughter to my Social Security account so she can talk to Social Security on my behalf. And I have a file folder with my will in it, and it's in a file cabinet. And every time I change the password, now you all know, so I have to change this. But when I change the password on my computer, I drop it into that folder. So when so they'll have access, to that information. So it's not only gathering information about your loved one, but it's also gathering information for those who may be caring for you in the future. So something I did well with John's care. This is additional information. So my mom and my husband both had extensive medical histories. I have a short medical history. Thankfully, I'm gonna thank God for that. But I became their scribe. Every time we went to a different doctor, a different specialist, they'd give you the same form and you had to fill it out. And it gives you like this much space and asks about all your surgeries. Yeah. John had that many surgeries on one shoulder, And so I finally got the idea, I should just type this up. And so I did. I remembered everything they asked for on those forms, and I just typed it all up, and I took copies with me. And so they would give me the form, and I'd say, okay, here it is. Oh, we'll make a copy. I said, no, this is your copy. Here it is. I've got his full medical history on this. Every place he's had a surgery, all of his medical conditions, all of those. Because not only, did we go to schedule appointments with different specialists. My husband and I also traveled in our RV, and more than once we followed the hospital signs to the next hospital and showed up in towns we didn't even know what town it was, and went to their hospital for something that had happened. And so, having that medical history with you, and not only having that, but as their caregiver, being able to give a concise medical history, I could use like 4 words that would tell them, the major things about John, so that they would know, okay, he's got this, he's got that, and this is what we need to be concerned about. So being able to be that concise historian, but then have an extensive history. I also, when you leave the doctor's office or the hospital and they give you that medication list, that's your medication, how many of you just file it or put it on your table? Well, I pull mine off, or John's off, and fold it up and put it in my purse. So the next time I go to the doctor, I can say, if he's added something, I can handwrite it on there, and you've got that medication history, for every caregiver, and you know what it is. So instead of saying, oh yeah, that's it. No, pay real attention to what they have on that list so that you've got a really good list. And John was on a specialty medication, especially medication that the hospitals never had and the doctors never knew about. They didn't have any knowledge because it was a special medication for pulmonary fibrosis. And there were some cautions about that. So I kept that medication, that information sheet that you get about your medication that you probably put in the trash like I do. I kept his for his medication, and it also went in my purse. So my purse had to go with me. So I had his medical history, I had his medication list, and I had the medication for his specialty medication. That's some of the information that you as a caregiver want to have at your fingertips, because you never know when you might need to use it. And what would I do differently from this side of my caregiving experience? I would have the discussion earlier with my mom about insurance, the location of her documents, and asked her if there was anything she wanted me to help with earlier. I would have created a list of people and organizations that needed to be notified of my husband's death and asked family members to help make those phone calls, even if I took care of the follow-on details. And this is something you can do now. I thought I had it all handled, but I handled John's death, even though it was anticipated, really was hard. It was hard. It's hard today. He passed away in December. And And I found, and I'm administratively a pretty strong person, but I found that it was difficult to call people who I didn't know and say, I'm calling you because my husband died. And it would have been really helpful. And I had to make those phone calls because I'm the only one who knew exactly why I was calling them. But if I had made a list of who needed to be notified, I had family members who would have helped do that. You know, and so just making that list, you know, call here about this pension, call here about this, and just write down the follow-up stuff that they need to have later. I can handle that later. But just saying out loud, I'm calling because, was hard. And as caregivers, you are so invested in your loved one that it is hard. It is hard. And I felt foolish. Okay, this is probably not about information, but you know, this is something that I thought I'm going to tell everyone about this. I felt foolish that I should have checked our credit cards to make sure that I was a co-owner. John and I had moved our who was responsible for financial stuff, had moved between the two of us, depending on who was busiest. Now it moved like once every 10 years, so it wasn't frequent. But John tended to do comparison shopping, and so he would get the credit card that gave the best whatever, you know. But when and we kept our balances paid off, so it wasn't on the interest rates. But when I took over our finances again in 2018, we had 2 credit cards. I didn't know why I needed to do anything else with them. You know, I could access them. I had a credit card in my name. You know, he had one in his wallet, but his wallet was in his dresser, so not a problem. Well, guess what? He had opened them. He made sure I had a card, but I was an authorized user because I was too busy to ever fill out forms and sign them. You know, so I was the authorized user. So somehow, and I'm not sure how this happens, but when someone dies, there's this notice that goes around, and both credit cards got canceled because I didn't own them. You know, he owned them, and it was a little. So I'm way too old to have a credit history of 2 years or a year, you know. But that's what I have, you know. So so there's a lot of things. It's a good credit history, but it's short for an older person. And a little. I'll take a few minutes to tell you a little funny that happened about that. John was hard of hearing, and he had hearing aids, but he lost a hearing aid. And it was because his oxygen cannula was flipping it off, etc. So I said, John, we'll just go to Costco. We'll get the ones that fit in your ears. And he said, well, he said, Susan, I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. I'm not sure if it's really important for me to get new hearing aids. I said, John, it's important that you hear for the rest of your life, whatever that is. And while we're in Costco and leaving with his new hearing aids, he said, I'm still not sure it was really worth it. I said, John, if you die before the 6-month refund, you know, full refund, no questions asked, I will return them. And he said, okay, so that either means I'm going to return them or he's going to get 6 months out of it. At least 6 months out of it. So when he passed away, you know, I kept the box and everything in the receipt, everything, not like I was expecting him to die any day, but, you know, I promised him I would return them. So I made an appointment to go up to Costco and return the hearing aids, except the credit cards were canceled. And when you return something to Costco, you can get your refund in 3 ways, either on the credit card that you charged them on, oh, canceled, or on the Costco credit card, canceled, or you can get store credit. Now, I'm a woman living alone, you know, 125 miles from Costco. I don't think I need $2,000 worth of store credit. So I went to Costco. My daughter went with me, and we planned like a whole day for this. And I applied for a credit card, and they gave me a credit card, and then they gave me credit on the credit card. But I could have avoided all of that if I had just checked to make sure I was an owner on the credit cards I was using. So I don't know if that applies to anyone, or how many might be going home to find out if they're an owner on their credit card. Okay. I think I told you that whole story. By the way, I found that missing hearing aid. probably a month later tucked way down in the sofa cushion. But John often told me, have no regrets. You should have no regrets. So I recognize I could have done some things differently. I probably could have done some things better, but I did the best I could every day. And I made my mom my priority when I was caring for her, and I made John my priority for all the time that I cared for him. And I not only survived several years as a caregiver, but I would say that I even thrived. And I know that I'm a better version of myself because of the time that I spent as a caregiver, having cared for two people whom I love deeply and I miss daily. And so that doesn't mean that I wasn't sleep deprived, doesn't mean that I didn't get cranky, didn't mean any of those things, but just a precious time in my life. But I'm being proactive about my own future, so my heirs, my family, will have an easier time caring for me than now. I hope to live. I'm like my mom. I hope to live in my own home up until the day I die. But in case I don't get to do that, I want them to have all the information that they need. So I want to start talking about some of the resources that we have available for you, so that you can really embrace this time as a caregiver and hopefully avoid some of the things that I didn't do well. Okay, last week, you all got one of these in your book, or if tonight's the first one. This is my planning guide. It's provided by Kane Funeral Home, and it starts with personal history and final wishes, and just a lot of things that are kind of an opening way to visit with your loved one. Either if you know their information, you can write in there. If you don't, then it's a way to know what you should gather. Someone told me today, oh yeah, if you get these, actually she said, I just need a list. I need a list. Well, there's a list in here, but there's more than one list for you to have a look at. And this is provided by Kane, because it also includes funeral planning. And it's important to do that, because at the time that you need to plan the funeral, you may not be at your best. And so having made those decisions ahead of time really helps. So here we are. Gather the photos ahead of time. My goodness. And so I think this is one. And then Harry Bowling from Kane is going to be here about funeral planning on November 11th, and he will he will email you a digital version of that. If you want to wait for him and ask him that, or if you look at this and say, I'd really like to just fill that out on the computer, just give Harry a call and I'm sure he'll email that to you. Harry Bowling at Kane. And then the Prepare to Care, which is the planning guide. And I really like, there's 6 or 7 for the first 6 or 7 that are over there, but I will get more. And I really like this because of the article on starting the conversation. How do you have the conversation with someone so that you start getting the information from them without offending them, and get it in a helpful way. And then the financial workbook for family caregivers. And I think one of the things I really like about this is in your packet in the red folder. It's another AARP publication, but it has information for both the caregiver and the care recipient. So the very situation I talked about, that if something happened to me and John needed care, because he couldn't follow up and do all the things, about calling about the pensions and the this and the that, having that information in here for the caregiver would be important. So it recognizes that while you're gathering your loved one's information, document your own information as well, because they're relying on you. Okay. There's 3 of these. I think there's 2 over there and this one. I ordered them just to see what they were like. I left the wrapping on one of them because it says, I'm dead now. What are you supposed to do? Or something like this. And so, it's really written from, like from my perspective, I'm going to document everything, and leave it for someone. So I don't think I'll buy more of these for you, but I think it has some useful, if it's popular, let me know. If you take these and you like it, you'll let me know. But one of them I really like is the instructions. If I'm unable to communicate, this is what I would like my caregivers to know. I think that's, there was another question here that I really liked. Oh, this is the one on who to notify. I handed my stepson and my stepson, my husband and I all worked for the same company for a time, and my stepson's and my husband's careers overlapped by about five, maybe 10 years. And so a lot of the people that my husband had worked with for a number of years, my stepson knew. And so when he arrived after his dad died, I handed him his dad's phone. And I said, you go through his contacts, and anybody you know, you call him. And so it was a way to have someone who they knew call him. And I wasn't doing that. Okay. And then so that's the end of life planner. And then this one is the complete elder care planner. I copied this from here. It says the task of gathering this information will take longer than you think. One way to get started is to photocopy the contents of your elder's wallet. In a matter of minutes, you'll have copies of their driver's license, proof of health insurance, social security number, credit cards, membership cards, and more. Okay, I don't think we're supposed to keep our social security cards in our wallets anymore. So my mom's probably was in her wallet, but mine's not. So look someplace else for the social security card if you don't find it there. And then this one I just thought was interesting, so I bought a couple of these. It's written by the same person, Joy Lovard, I think her name is, and I like the title, Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? And so this is really planning forward. So if you take this book, let me know what you think of it. So how do the books work? AARP gave us a grant last year. We spent most of the money on books. We spent some of the money on this speaker system and some on these tables, but we spent most of the money on books. And at the end of the year, we asked people, were the books helpful? And they said overwhelmingly, yes. And so we have some books over there tonight, and then every workshop, I'll bring some additional books that probably have something to do with that night's topic. So feel free to take a book. Take a couple tonight, and if you have books that you open them and you say, I don't really think this pertains to me, bring it back. I'm sure others will use a slightly used book, and not every book is going to speak to everyone. And so that's what's what with the books, and that's how we're spending the money that we're getting from our sponsors this year is to buy additional books. So if there's one that's really popular, we'll just order some more. Okay, so other books I have tonight on the left side of the big table over here are these books like this, and I'll take these and add them over there. In the middle of the table, how many of you have read Reader's Digest? You like those little short articles? You don't have to commit for a long time. Well, to me, that's what a devotional is, and so, and other books like that, that you just have 5 minutes. I'm going to read just 5 minutes, and hopefully there's something in that. And so I have a couple versions down there about that. One of them is a series of books on chicken soup for the soul. And it's easy reading. There's like 3 or 4 pages per article. I have some that are just general, and then there's some that are chicken soup for the soul for caregivers of people with Alzheimer's. And so I encourage you to take one of those if that pertains to you. There's also, let's see. I have a couple of versions of this. This is the Caregiver's Companion, and it's more of a guided journal. So there's maybe 3 or 4 pages, and then there's some questions, and it's written by a couple of Catholic women who were caregivers of family members. I won't give you this one because I've written it. But there's a couple more of those, and I think I've ordered some more, and so they'll be on their way. And then there's a 60-day devotional for people who are caregivers of people with Alzheimer's or other dementias. And that's more of a guided journal as well. So have a look, and there's quite a few copies of that. Okay. And then I have one more thing to talk about here, and that is, what are these table texts about pillars? One of the things we're talking about this year is brain health for the caregivers, caring for the caregivers. AARP has several publications about caring for the caregivers. And we have Sam Shumway, who is the state director for AARP, is going to be here on November 4th. And he's going to talk about brain health for caregivers. But I didn't want to wait till he came in November to introduce you to that idea. And so the pillars on the table, there's 6 pillars. There's one on here that has all 6 of them. And then if you sit at different tables, I just grab them out and make sure there's 2 on each table. So over the 12 weeks, you'll probably read all of the tips, and they're different on either side. So have a look while you're having dinner. Let's see, this one is ongoing exercise. Do anything that gets your body to move, and physical activity boosts mental well-being. Those are 2 tips, that you can use that take care of the caregiver themselves. So that's what those are there for. Oh, and one more. And everyone should take one of these because I think I have enough for everyone. One of the tips is have an attitude of gratitude. Be grateful. And so I have little stacks, or they look like this, but there's a whole stack. And on one side, it'll have a scripture verse about Thanksgiving or gratitude. And on the other side, it says, today I am grateful for. I have a stack of these on my dresser, and I have a jar and a pen on my dresser. And especially when things were hard, when they were the hardest, I made sure I was writing at least once a day something I was grateful for. And it can be something like, I'm grateful for this friend. When we came back from 2 months in our RV, I wrote, I'm thankful for a washing machine. But, that attitude of gratitude. So whatever your practice is, getting up in the morning, what am I grateful for today? Or at the end of the day, what am I grateful for? And writing it out. I'm a visual learner, so writing it out just puts it in my mind. Yes, I am grateful for this, and the day has gone well. So I encourage everyone to pick up one of those. There's some that are floral and some that aren't, so you can pick what you like. Thank you very much. Next week, we are going to talk about nursing homes and other options.